Good day, Honors Biology students. Welcome to Video Lecture Episode 4. Remember, we're still in Chapter 11, which is Complex Inheritance and Human Heredity, and we're still working our way through Section 1. Yesterday, we stopped with the first of two dominant genetic disorders we're going to talk about, that being Huntington's disease, and now we're going to move into achondroplasia. Individuals with this condition have small bodies and limbs that are comparatively shorter than what we would normally see. This genetic disorder is the most common form of dwarfism. People with this condition will reach an adult size of about 4 feet and live a normal life expectancy. 75% of individuals with this condition are born to parents of an average size. The conclusion is that this condition occurred because of a new mutation or genetic change. So how do we understand how genetics passes on? Well, we use something called pedigrees. And let me just remind you that when scientists study animals or plants, such as fruit flies and pea plants, they can perform crosses to study genetic relationships. You remember the Punnett square? Well, with humans, scientists study the genetic relationship via what we call pedigrees. So what is a pedigree? Well, moving to slide 51, a pedigree is a diagram that traces the inheritance of a particular trait through several generations. In pedigree, symbols are used to represent things. And if you look at figure 11.1, which is at the bottom of slide 51, you'll notice that squares represent males and circles represent females. You'll also notice there's two colors there, a yellow and a red. Well, the dark color, the red, is the trait being studied. And you can also notice that a carrier is represented by either a square or a circle, but then they have half the dark color and half the yellow color. So it's a half and half, and that indicates a carrier. Some other information to keep in mind when reading a pedigree is that a horizontal line between two people refers to them being the parents. And you can see this as well in the image there below on slide 51, 2, and 3, 51, 52, 53. The offspring are below the parents and are placed in order of oldest to youngest, starting at the left and going to the right. Roman numerals are also used in pedigrees, and they're used to distinguish between generations. If you don't know the Roman numerals, I have some Roman numeral symbols actually listed on slide 54 in two different images. In slide 55, I just have some examples of some other pedigrees, one for an autosomal dominant condition, autosomal recessive condition, and an X-linked condition as well. Now moving into slide 56, we're going to talk about analyzing pedigrees, in other words, breaking down the information and understanding what's there. In the figure in slide 56, we see a pedigree of Tay-Sachs, which remember is a recessive genetic disorder. And it is caused, remember, by a lack of an enzyme involved in lipid metabolism, in other words, the breakdown of a particular lipid. Well, the lack of the enzyme causes lipids to be built up in the central nervous system and actually can lead to death. Now, using the image, we can analyze the pedigree of Tay-Sachs and see how two parents that are unaffected have a child that is affected. And we see that because both the parents are carriers. Okay, let us look at another condition in relation to pedigrees, and that condition is called Polydactyl. Polydactyl is a dominant genetic disorder, and it's a disorder where people have extra fingers and toes. Since this is a dominant disorder, and we know for dominant genes to pass on requires only one dominant allele, well, we can come to some conclusions, or at least what they would look like. So looking at slide 59, we have an image there. That's figure 11.3. And here's a pedigree for polydactyl. Remember once again that the dark color is the polydactyl trait. So you can see there is 3 generations included in this particular pedigree. Pedigrees are very helpful as they help us infer genotypes from the observation of phenotypes. Okay, this is information from slide 60 for those who are trying to follow along with the slides. Now, the people that study this would be called a genealogist. A genealogist, just by observing physical traits, can determine what genes an individual will most likely have. It's not a guarantee, but there's at least a good high percentage, especially considering if they trace far enough back in the genetics of a particular individual. Now we're going to stop today at slide 61. On 61, it mentions that genetic counselors use pedigrees to determine whether inheritance patterns are dominant and recessive. And they do this by picking a trait and studying it to see whether it is recessive or dominant. Obviously, dominant traits are easier to recognize. So this is, by the way, these types of genetic counselors will meet with parents and try to determine any potential genetic conditions that could be passed on, just so they're aware of this in advance so they can best prepare. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes Video Lecture Episode 4. Please check this out and make sure that you are please working on filling in, taking notes, and uploading the assignment where in the correct spot on Google Classroom. Have a nice day. I'll see you later.